Hello and welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Joining me today is Cyndi Akins with Caldwell Hospice and Palliative Care. Welcome, Cyndi.
Thank you.
Cyndi, you're volunteer coordinator for Caldwell Hospice. Tell us a little bit about your role.
My role at Caldwell Hospice as volunteer coordinator, I work with all of our volunteers, and we have about 250 volunteers that serve our 8-county region. We have volunteers that serve in the high country as well as in the low country, and it's a wonderful role that I serve, getting to know our volunteers in all different capacities, but we work really closely together. Crystal Birch is our volunteer support specialist, and Erica Andrews is the volunteer coordinator in the high country. So together the three of us work really hard and have a good time working with our volunteers and matching them in the role and the discipline that they will serve with our patients or not. We have different disciplines of volunteers, but we do work really, really close with our volunteers.
Now, some people may not be familiar with your high country expansion. What counties do you serve?
Ashe, Avery, and Wilkes and Watauga, and then we serve Caldwell, Catawba, Alexander, and Burke. We have probably close to 30 volunteers in the high country, and the remaining are in our low country. But our volunteers are amazing, what they do and the time that they give. We're very fortunate.
What does a hospice volunteer do? What opportunities are there?
We have lots of opportunities. And first I want to say that most often when we go to speak to organizations or groups, we will hear, oh, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know if I could be a volunteer. But as I will tell you, there are all ways of serving as a volunteer with our organization, not just directly with our patients and families. However, that is a great need that we have, is patient-family volunteers who work directly with our families and patients. But I actually have a list with me.
You have a full list here.
I do, and I don't want to leave anything out, so I like to bring my list with me. But as I said, our patient-family volunteers are our greatest need, and that primarily is the major discipline of our volunteers who serve in long-term care facilities. So, of course, we have patients that reside in facilities, and then we have home care patients. The majority of our patients are in their homes, and then we also have our patient care unit volunteers who serve patients on our unit, and then sometimes in the hospital. But our patient-family volunteers primarily serve as companions for the patients, and some serve to provide caregiver relief for caregivers and families, and both. So it's a very rewarding role that our volunteers serve. Most often, if we ask volunteers who are new how they learned about becoming a volunteer, is that they had a personal connection with a family member or a friend who passed with us, or just had an experience with us. So, but then of course we've got those that have learned through others that, wow, that sounds really neat, I would love to give back, or I would love to have that opportunity. So, but again, our patient-family volunteers are our most needed.
Do you need special skills to be a patient-family volunteer?
The special skill that you need is to just love people, want to care for others, have a true desire and passion to serve others. There is no special skill. You don't have to speak a certain lingo or language. You don't have to know any more than another person. You don't have to have any special education. Truly just to want to serve others and have that heart and passion to do so.
But as you said earlier, patient and family volunteers are just one type of volunteer that you have.
That is correct.
What are some of the others?
We do have, speaking of patient family, we do have veterans who serve our patients who are veterans. So it's called our Veteran Honoring Veterans program. And upon admission, if we learn that a patient is a veteran and they would like to have what's called a ceremony, a Veterans Honoring Veterans ceremony, then we will call a veteran volunteer and let them go visit the patient and give them a certificate, and as well a framed certificate, as well as a handheld flag and a flag lapel pin, which they put on, and a lapkin that we present them with, a handmade lapkin that I've brought at other interviews. I did not bring one today. I regret that I didn't, but our veteran volunteers are remarkable. They are just amazing. They enjoy the experience. It's not only beneficial for our patients and families who receive that ceremony, but it's it's very special to our veterans. And we are always in need of veteran volunteers. So it's a wonderful, beautiful ceremony. And the ceremonies don't have to be very long. They may be 5 minutes, they may be 20 minutes. It may be that a veteran serves a patient, just the two of them. It may be that there's a room full of family when the ceremony is given. But every single one is different, it's unique, and it's special.
That's a really great way to give back.
It is, it sure is. We're very fortunate. We also have volunteer chaplains who serve alongside our chaplains, our staff chaplains, and that's a great service that we provide. We have ambassadors. Our volunteer ambassadors serve as liaisons between their church and our organization. So they provide education and information about programs, events, just general information about Caldwell Hospice and Palliative Care to their congregation. So we have a great group of ambassadors who are very dedicated. And ambassadors are usually chosen by the minister of the church that they serve. And then they also have some special training that we will provide, but we greatly need ambassadors, and they're very important. We have volunteers, and our volunteer program is so very cool. Crystal, who I mentioned earlier, she manages our volunteers for the most part and does an amazing job with them. To be a volunteer, you must go through training. They have a special volunteer training, and they must go to a high school, a local high school, and it's usually South Caldwell, High Brighton, or West Caldwell here locally. And they primarily serve in our facilities. Most of our facilities. Sometimes they'll go into the homes of the patients and maybe clean up in their homes or decorate for Christmas. They play bingo with the residents in the facilities. They have parties. So volunteers are super awesome. They're very dedicated. They are fun. They have energy. Some of them help me in my office. They're amazing. So, and there aren't very many volunteer programs out there. So we're really fortunate to have our volunteers. And then we have 11th hour volunteers. 11th hour volunteers serve along the bedside of someone or a patient who is actively dying. Sometimes our patients, unfortunately, for whatever reason, may not have family members or friends with them. So our 11th hour volunteers then come in and are with that patient during their final hours, and it's extremely beautiful. And families are sometimes there. Sometimes our families during those final hours just need some support. They may want a volunteer there for themselves, or maybe they need to exit the room and want some support, or they just need someone with the patient. So 11th hour volunteers go through a very special, smaller scale training. They also go through our main training, of course, but they have a special, smaller training that they go through to be an 11th hour volunteer, but something that's usually, our 11th hour volunteers usually choose to do that, of course. They've grown to love what they do as a volunteer, and so that's something that they usually come to us and say, I would love to be an 11th hour volunteer. So.
Is 11th hour volunteer something where people start out, or do they start out as a patient family volunteer first and maybe become accustomed to being a hospice volunteer?
Yes, very much so. They usually start out as a patient family volunteer, and actually we ask that they serve in that capacity for about 6 months, and then they'll go through training, and then they can become an 11th hour volunteer. And it's really a time-pressing situation when we get a call, Crystal or I get a call from a social worker that says we have a patient that's dying and we need an 11th hour volunteer, and we stop everything we're doing and we call our 11th hour volunteers, and most often, unless there's a conflict with their schedule, they'll say, I'll be right there. Usually they're there for a couple hours, and then we'll call another volunteer and have one in place to relieve them. And some of our 11th hour volunteers serve for as long as they can. You know, they may be with the patient for 3 or 4 hours. So it's just, again, it's a very beautiful experience for everyone, and we're so appreciative that we can do that for our patients and families.
And again, these are the volunteers who are with the patient at the very last hours.
That is correct.
So they are I think, by the bedside.
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
So it's very interactive with the patient and possibly with the family.
Oh yes, and you know they may be holding the hand of the patient that passes when they pass. And it's really amazing. Some of our volunteers are so comfortable doing that, and they want to be there. And it's just an experience that I think unless you actually go through it, you know, you really don't understand. But it's just such a great service that we provide that we're just so grateful to have.
But again, there are lots of other volunteer opportunities if you're not ready. And I would say most people, when they first become a hospice volunteer, they're not ready for that 11th hour experience, but there are other things. But there are some special skills people need to have. As I look down at your list.
Yes. Our next one is hairdresser.
Our next one is hairdresser.
Yes, we do. We have hairdresser volunteers. We're very limited. I will tell you, our very, 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 very first volunteer that we had 35 plus years ago, she is still serving with us and cuts patients' hair.
And she is a hairdresser.
She is a hairdresser. And it's really neat because she takes the day off that she has from her job, she takes that day to serve our patients and cut their hair. And you know, if you can imagine how important it is for us to get our hair cut and how we look forward to that, you know, our patients do too. And it makes them feel special and feel good, and it makes our families feel good too. So any of you out there, if you know any hairdressers that would like to give of their time, you know, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it sure means a lot. So we are in need of hairdressers.
It would mean, for me personally, that would be very important. That would be high on my list of volunteers.
Yes.
If anything happened. But, and I think the next one requires some special training, but it probably brings a lot of joy to people.
Pet therapy. It sure does. We have 3 beautiful, beautiful dogs that come through training. The dogs don't come through training, their owners do. But anyway, it's really it is a neat volunteer experience that we have. Our volunteers bring their pets, who are certified, of course, to the patient care units, and they visit with our patients. So they usually come on a weekly basis, usually 1 or 2 days a week. They come and they ask our nurses, are there any patients that would like to spend some time with our animals, our dogs? And sometimes the dogs will just, you know, climb up on the bed with them and just be there, and that's okay if that's what the patient and family want. So it's a really neat and fun thing that we provide as well.
And I imagine that you have some patients who may not really be pet people when they're in your unit or before they came to your unit, but that pet brings so much joy to them.
Yes, and those of us that are pet lovers, we know how important our pets are. And how much joy they bring.
Right.
So you're right. I mean, it's so neat. I'm so glad that we get to do that. And the owners of the pets are so gracious to give of their time to come too, because yeah, it's a great thing. And then we also have Legacy, and Legacy volunteers are specially trained to interview our patients. Who choose to be interviewed, of course. This is done upon admission, or even later down the road if a patient says, you know, I'd like to be interviewed and leave that interview behind for my family, for my friends. So we have volunteers who again are specially trained to interview our patients and record their stories, or to record a message that they want to leave behind. And that is a great thing, and we're really wanting to expand that Legacy program, which we're on the way to do that, but it's a beautiful service that we provide.
How do you record the stories?
We actually have the interviews, you know, with them. We ask them the questions, and then we just have, the last one that we did, we literally used a phone. We just used a little phone. Sometimes we have an iPad. We're in the process of getting more specialized equipment to do that. But it's very simple. It's a very simple project. There's not a whole lot of, you know, expense or special equipment that's provided. A lot of times, especially with kids nowadays, they just pick up their phone and start recording, and you know, it can be as simple as that. Of course, we edit it, and we do put it on DVDs for the family to have. So it
really is a keepsake for the family, and I imagine that each legacy project is as unique as the person interviewed.
Most definitely. And I can tell you the last one that I went to, we interviewed the patient and we prefaced it by saying, you know, if you'd like for us to ask you specific questions, we'll be happy to. We want to make this what you want it to be. And she said, I think I'll be fine. Let me just lean back in this chair. And she talked for probably an hour. I mean, did not stop. And it was absolutely beautiful. And she spoke to each one of her grandchildren. And she said, this is so important to me. This is what I really, really want. I would love for this to get into their hands. And so, of course, we made it as quickly as possible. We got it to the family, and very shortly after she passed. So it was a beautiful experience. It sure was.
And the next thing on your list is another beautiful experience. I mean, we say that and it might sound trite to our viewers, but really it is, because you're getting to share life with people and share their end-of-life journey. So tell us about visual music.
Well, visual music, if there's anybody out there that has a special passion for music, maybe you have a great talent, you sing or you play an instrument that you'd like to share with a patient at their final days. That's what this program is for. It's visual music, and they're specially trained also. It's not a whole lot of training, but we like to work closely one-on-one with them, just give them experience ahead of time what it would be like. But some patients just, that's what they think about, that's what they desire, that's what they want when they're at their end of life, is to have a certain song played, or just to have soft music. It doesn't even have to be someone coming in to sing a song or to play an instrument. Maybe they just have some certain music that they like for us to play for them. So our volunteers do that, and they get so much out of that. And again, kind of like the pets, if you have a passion and love for music, it can mean so much to you.
So again, that's just very important. And that doesn't have to be final hours.
Correct. It doesn't. That's
it could
correct.
be, it's just something you find comforting as a patient.
And I did not put this on here, but we also have what's called Music Matters. And that is where usually our volunteers come to the office and they make a compilation of songs on a CD and bring it to the patient to be able to listen to it anytime. But it's a list of songs that patient wants to hear. Or maybe there's a favorite artist they have, or a certain, if they like country music or gospel music, and they tell us what they like, we will find those songs and we will put them on a CD for them. So, and our volunteers appreciate doing that. That means a lot to them to be able to do that and share that with patients. So that's something else.
And that is their expertise.
It is.
I mean,
I had to have help with a couple of CDs that I have had to make, and I was like, I really need a volunteer's help putting all these together for me. So it is. They love to do that, and they're so good at it.
So yeah, why not use what they're great at?
Yeah.
Hospice serves patients beyond, or serves families after the patient's death, and I think a lot of times people forget about that hospice is still there supporting families after that patient dies. So you need bereavement volunteers, right?
We sure do. That is correct. And we serve families, 13 months after the passing of their loved one. So volunteers who serve as bereavement volunteers will serve primarily in our Ashwood Grief and Counseling office with Kimberly Setzer and Julie Holman in our bereavement area. And they will make phone calls to family members. They'll write cards at anniversaries and birthdays. They'll reach out to them in any way that they possibly can. Maybe they'll make visits. We have volunteers who, that's their passion, is not to somewhat counsel, but just be there to listen to families who want to talk about their loved one, or just be there, just to provide some support and love, and just so that they'll know someone is there for them, and it's a part of our team, and we're family, and we're there for them. So we do have volunteers that want to serve in that capacity.
Now the last things on the list are less patient involved and more just true service. This is just a servant's heart task.
That is correct. And when volunteers sometimes come to volunteer training, or even before they come to training, on the phone they'll call and they'll say, listen, I want to serve, I want to be a volunteer, but I just don't want to serve with patients. Is there anything I can do? And that is where, just 3 of these I'd listed, but there are more opportunities for volunteers. We have those that deliver meals. So we have 2 patient care units, one in Hudson, it's our 4 Lines patient care unit, and then one in Lenoir, or Kirkwood, our Stevens patient care unit. And so we have meals, of course, that we prepare for our patients and families, and our volunteers deliver those meals. They're prepared in Hudson at our patient care unit facility, at our McCrary Professional Center, rather, and they are delivered to Kirkwood. And we need those volunteers to do that on a daily basis. So they give of their time to do that, and that's something that we always need, because there are days when they'll call and say, you know, we just can't make that delivery today. And it's great to have a number of other volunteers who can pick that up and fill in.
Sure, and that happens 3 times a day, I guess.
A couple times anyway, yeah.
At least a couple times.
Yeah. And then we have grounds and maintenance volunteers. So some of those strong men and women out there who want to just work on our grounds, you know, spread mulch, pull weeds, if there's painting that needs to be done, some light painting, anything like that. At one point we needed some new equipment put in our patient's room, some TVs, and we needed some strong hands and arms to do that. So we call on volunteers to help us, and they're very willing and much needed. We have reception desk volunteers, and if you serve at the reception desk, that is at our 4 Lines patient care unit in Hudson, and if you can imagine never having been at either one of our units and walking into our patient care unit to see a loved one for the first time, how anxious you might be or just overwhelmed. So our volunteers who serve at the desk greet guests when they come in, and they direct them where they need to go. So we are in great need of reception desk volunteers. Our nurses are very, very busy attending to our patients and our families, so our volunteers help them out as well. It's something that our volunteers enjoy. You know, it's not that direct patient care involvement, but it still means a lot. It means a whole lot. So, and they can read a book. We're at the desk. It's not something that they're constantly, you know, helping people every second. They've got some downtime to just sit and read or work puzzles. But that is another volunteer opportunity that's out there that we need help with. So.
And I can see that one being a bridge into patient care, patient family volunteerism.
Yes.
Because you're there, you're working a little bit with the families, and then as you get more comfortable, you can expand.
Right. And our patients and families, excuse me, really get to know those volunteers who were there, because they come and go so often. And they feel comfortable knowing those volunteers when they come. You know, a familiar face just means so much, and the connection that's made in that capacity is really neat. Yeah. And then, yes, those volunteers in turn think, wow, I really got to know that family. I'd like to get to know everybody, and I'd like to really learn more about them and the patients. So, yeah, you're right. They eventually then say, I'd like to be a patient family volunteer. And a lot of those roles kind of do that. You know, at some point, a lot of our volunteers decide, yeah, I'm feeling more comfortable about things. I'd like to move into more patient family care.
And really, that's okay. That you don't mind that. And when people want to change roles, that is a really good experience for you to see a volunteer come and say, I want to spread my wings more.
It is, and we have some volunteers who I can think of one right now. He delivers meals. He is a veteran, so he serves our veterans patients. He is a patient family volunteer. He works directly with those patients who aren't veterans. He serves as Santa Claus on our unit. I mean, he does so much in different ways, and that's not the experience for everybody, and that's great, that's fine. But there's an example of one volunteer who serves in many roles and enjoys all of them, and is so needed.
We've got one more on our list, but I know there's probably more, and there's those things that just pop up that don't fit into any of these categories,
right.
But you're like, a volunteer could do this. So.
Right.
In job descriptions, it says other duties as assigned. I'm sure you need volunteers who will do other duties as assigned.
Yes, and we have many that serve in the office, right? And events that we have one-time events. We have children's grief camp that we absolutely could not operate without volunteers. Our memorial services that we have annually, our volunteers help greatly with that. We have virtual dementia tours, which is volunteer driven. I mean, it really is. We have very, very minimal staff that help with that, and the rest are volunteers. So there are lots of other ways that I haven't covered, but yeah, volunteers serve in so many ways, and it's just really exciting to get a new volunteer started, and how excited they are to get in and go, and then they just, like you said, they spread their wings and they just want more and more.
How many hours do you have to serve to be a volunteer?
4 hours a year. That is extremely minimal, but 4 hours a year is what is required to serve as a volunteer. So
basically one event?
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing the hours that our volunteers do serve. It really is, especially if you're a patient family volunteer. You may serve or go visit with your patient once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. Usually a visit is no more than 2 hours at a time. Sometimes our volunteers love to spend more time than that if the patient is able and wants that. Sometimes a visit may be 5 minutes, depending on the situation with the patient and what they're going through that day and what they feel like. But 4 hours is the minimum amount, and we keep track of those hours for all of our volunteers. If they haven't served, then we call them up and we remind them they have a certain amount of hours that they must serve. But it's that is one requirement that we have. I'll go on to the next category here, our requirements to volunteer. Adult volunteers must be 18 years of age or older. They basically fill out an application, and we review that application. They fill out a background check, and that's taken care of. There are a few other paperwork items that we take care of. But they must attend the training. Usually our trainings are about 16 hours, and that's over the course of 2 days. And that training is held at the McCurry Professional Center in one of our meeting rooms at our Hudson location. Right now, due to COVID-19, we are resorting to doing our trainings virtually, as is a lot of other others in the world. But it's worked out really well. We had our first virtual training in July, and we had a good turnout. It was very well received. They learned a lot. It was surprising that it was as intimate as it was. Usually our trainings together at our meeting room in Hudson are very personable. We learned a lot about each other in a very short amount of time, and it's awesome. I love it. Our virtual training was great. I loved it too, and I'm excited. So our next one is going to be on Tuesday and Thursday, October the 20th and 22nd. Instead of a 16-hour training, which is very long, we have condensed that to about a 7-hour training, a little over 7 hours. So we've really tried hard to put together the same amount of information as best we can into that training. So we're not sure how long we're going to continue to have our virtual trainings, but as long as folks are willing and want to attend, we will keep doing them. We don't want to stop. We don't want to not offer trainings to volunteers. As a matter of fact, through COVID, we're learning that there are folks out there who may not have wanted to volunteer, except that having gone through the pandemic like we have, they're really wanting to. I think they're really seeing that, wow, there are people out there who need help, and now's my time to do it. So,
how can people sign up for the virtual volunteer training?
They can call our organization, and we've got one number, 754-0101. They can call and just ask to speak with Volunteer Services, and I will take the call, or Crystal or someone in our department will give them information. We'll either mail them or email them an application. You can actually get our application online. Just go straight to our website, complete the application, submit it, and it comes straight to us. So if folks have questions, if they're just even considering going through our training and they've got questions, don't want them to hesitate to call us, ask anything they want to ask. We'll be glad to answer and hopefully convince them into really coming through the training. I've never had anyone come through training that's decided not to volunteer. As a matter of fact, they've said, gosh, that was great. I had no idea that much was offered, not necessarily just through Volunteer Services, but through your organization. Had no idea that, you know, social workers did that much, and the nurses did this, and your medical director, wow, and, you know, your CEO, she's amazing. So, you know, there's so much you learn about Caldwell Hospice and palliative care coming through volunteer training.
So if someone's not 100% sure, they could still go through volunteer training?
Sure. Oh, sure. Most definitely. They can come through training. And usually, because they've gone through training, they receive a huge manual with lots of good information. We have a post-training interview after the training. So we will sit down, myself or Crystal will sit down, or Erica, one-on-one with the volunteers, just like you and I are doing. We'll ask questions. You let me know what you feel like you're comfortable doing. Most of the time our volunteers are ready to go. I mean, immediately. They're like, well, how can I get started? When can I get started? So it's a great thing, but you certainly don't have to go through training and then be a volunteer. You know, that's our hope and desire, but you know, sometimes it's just not for you. There's lots of ways to volunteer out there, and all of them are great. I mean, volunteers give of their time and energy, you know, at no cost. So we're grateful for our volunteers, but if they have any questions at all, they can call. Yeah.
Cyndi, is there anything we've forgotten?
Well, there probably is. But
I'm sure there is. I know.
I can't think of anything right now. I know we covered so much in a short amount of time, but I guess my main thing to stress is just that if you're considering being a volunteer, you're not even sure where, consider us, consider Caldwell Hospice and Palliative Care. Like I said, I've never had a volunteer that's regretted being a volunteer. The connections, especially with patients and families, the connections you make immediately, and not even immediately, just over time sometimes, those connections are just priceless.
And my experience has been your volunteers become friends. So not only do you build friendships if you're a patient-family volunteer, but just with your fellow volunteers.
Most definitely, and I'm so glad you said that, because I did want to say that. I've thought about that earlier. It's so true. We have social gatherings. All our ambassadors meet quarterly. We laugh. We learn together. We talk about experiences together. We have a round table once a year. It's what we call a round table. All the volunteers who are able to come, we have a cover dish. We have a program. Again, we laugh, we eat. And then even at the trainings, you know, at our trainings, those who attend those trainings become close. It's like a classroom setting. You know, you become close to your classmates, just like our volunteers become close together. So thank you for saying that. That's so true.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do for Caldwell Hospice, and thank you to all your volunteers, because they really do amazing work.
They do. Thank you for saying that. Yes,
they really do.
We try to praise them as much as we possibly can, and I don't know that we do it enough, but
well, yeah. They do, and you do a great job recognizing your volunteers.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.